The Roman Republic was built on the foundation of an insatiable appetite for wealth and territory, a hunger that eventually consumed both the conquerors and the conquered. To be a Roman consul was to hold the keys to the world's treasury, but for some, even the vast riches of the state were not enough to satisfy a personal craving for gold. History is littered with the corpses of those who reached too high, but few fell as spectacularly or as painfully as Manius Aquilius. In the year 74 BCE, Rome sent Aquilius to Asia Minor with a singular mandate: to restore order and protect Roman interests. He was a man of high status, a former consul who had successfully led military campaigns in the past. Yet, his ambition and his legendary greed led him to make a fatal diplomatic mistake that would spark one of the bloodiest conflicts in ancient history. This was not merely a story of a lost battle, but a story of symbolic retribution. It is the story of a man who loved gold so much that his enemies decided to make it a permanent part of him. Today, on Last Breath Records, we go beyond the history books to examine the agonizing final moments of a man who learned that some thirsts can never be quenched. Asia Minor was a tinderbox of competing interests, and at the center of this geopolitical storm was Mithridates VI of Pontus, a king who harbored a special, deep-seated hatred for Roman expansion. Aquilius, however, saw the region not as a delicate balance to be maintained, but as a resource to be exploited. In a move driven by a desire for quick profit, Aquilius encouraged the king of Bithynia to launch raids into Mithridates' territories. He believed that the Roman name alone would be enough to intimidate the Pontic king into submission. He was catastrophically wrong. This provocation sparked what historians now call the First Mithridatic War, a conflict that would see the Roman legions facing a force the likes of which they had rarely encountered. Mithridates responded with overwhelming and decisive force, while Aquilius commanded a relatively small and disorganized force of approximately 6,000 men. The Pontic king arrived with a staggering army of 100,000 soldiers. The Roman defense was not just defeated, it was utterly crushed. In the chaos of the retreat, the once proud Roman general found himself transformed into a desperate fugitive, fleeing for his life through a land that had grown to despise the very ground he walked on. Manius Aquilius fled to the island of Lesbos, hoping to find a vessel that could carry him away from the approaching Pontic storm and back to the safety of Rome. He attempted to hide in a small coastal village, stripping away the ornate armor and symbols of office that had once marked his divine status as a representative of the Republic. But in the ancient world, there was no anonymity for a man of his stature. He was recognized by local fishermen, men whose lives had been made miserable by the Roman tendency to exploit the wealth of every territory they touched. These fishermen did not see a nobleman in need of sanctuary. They saw the embodiment of the greed that was stripping their land bare. With no hesitation, the fishermen betrayed him. They dragged Aquilius from his hiding place and delivered him, bound and humiliated, to the feet of King Mithridates. For the king of Pontus, this was more than just the capture of a high-ranking officer. It was an opportunity to stage a theatrical demonstration of justice. Mithridates ordered a public trial, a spectacle designed to demonstrate his power to the people of Asia Minor. Aquilius was found guilty of war crimes and extreme exploitation. He was a man who had started an unnecessary war for the sake of profit, and Mithridates intended for his punishment to be as symbolic as it was excruciating. In the royal court, surrounded by the very people he had sought to plunder, Aquilius was forced into a seated position. He was no longer the commander of legions, but a prisoner of his own reputation. The king of Pontus approached the bound general and spoke words that would ring through history. "You Romans thirst for gold. Now you shall have your fill." The execution was handled with clinical, mechanical precision. To ensure the punishment could be carried out, the executioners first had to overcome the body's natural instinct to resist. A metal funnel was forced between Aquilius's teeth, used as a pry to push his jaw open to its absolute breaking point. The sound of his jawbone cracking under the pressure would have been audible to everyone in the room, a precursor to the true horror that was about to unfold. His head was held rigid, his airway exposed, and his eyes wide with the realization of the agony that was being prepared just a few feet away. In a corner of the chamber, a cauldron of gold coins had been melted into a liquid state. The metal glowed a bright, lethal yellow in the dimly lit room. This gold, heated to a temperature exceeding 1,600 degrees Fahrenheit, was now brought forward. The molten gold was poured slowly and deliberately into the funnel, and by extension, directly into Aquilius's mouth. The physical destruction began the microsecond the liquid metal touched his lips. The 1,600-degree fluid instantly seared his lips and tongue, turning the soft tissues into charred remains. As the metal flowed down his esophagus, it cauterized blood vessels instantly, preventing him from bleeding out too quickly and ensuring he remained conscious to feel the full extent of the heat. The liquid gold filled his throat, creating a total and sudden blockage of his airway. He could neither breathe nor scream. The only sound would have been the horrific sizzle of cooking human tissue. The molten metal continued its path downward, scorching his internal organs as it moved toward his stomach. The sheer weight of the gold, combined with its temperature, meant that his insides were literally being cooked from the inside out. His eyes would have bulged in the final, reflexive struggle for oxygen as the metal reached his stomach. Death did not come as a swift mercy. For several agonizing seconds, Aquilius's brain remained aware as the metal began to cool and solidify inside his body. The gold acted like a thermal battery, holding the heat against his vital organs and ensuring the damage continued even after the pouring had stopped. His body would have convulsed, a final muscle spasm triggered by the catastrophic trauma to his nervous system. His extremities would have grown cold even as his core remained a furnace of solidifying metal. In those final moments, the richest man in Rome, spiritually in his greed, was no longer a human being, but a walking exhibition of dynastic and personal decay. When the light finally faded from his eyes, he was left as a rotting remains on the very kind of stake, or in this case, a seated throne, that he had used to intimidate others. His body contained the very treasure he had sparked a war to obtain, a permanent and heavy reminder of his greed. Manius Aquilius's death sent a shockwave through the Roman world. It was a message from the East that Rome's thirst for gold would not be tolerated without a price. Mithridates had not just killed a consul, he had authored a macabre piece of political theater that would be repeated in later years with other Roman figures like Marcus Licinius Crassus. The golden karma of Aquilius became a cautionary tale about the dangers of unbridled ambition. He died not on a glorious battlefield, but in a room filled with the smell of his own burning flesh, his final words lost to a throat filled with the metal he loved. His death marked the beginning of a summer of madness for the Roman Republic in Asia Minor, a summer that would claim thousands of lives before the conflict was resolved. But for the people of Lesbos and Pontus, the image of the Roman general being filled with gold remained a symbol of the ultimate retribution, a man literally consumed by the very object of his obsession. The story of Manius Aquilius reminds us that in the world of the painful historian, the punishments of the past were often designed to mirror the crimes of the accused. His last breath was not a plea for mercy, but a silent golden scream that echoes through the centuries. The gold that solidifed in his stomach is long gone, but the record of his suffering remains. Thank you for joining us for this archival look at the darkest corners of human history. If you have the stomach for more, stay tuned to Last Breath Records for our next entry into the annals of agony.